I want to just give a brief overview about our product ABACUS, because it's actually split out into two parts. We have ABACUS Studio, what we see as the root of our tree. What we do here, this is where you build out your meta model, you do your initial mass data imports, create any viewpoints and user permissions, and that initial configuration, and then that can be fed out through our collaboration server and into this leafy section that we see at the top, which we call ABACUS Enterprise, and that's the area of focus for today's session. ABACUS Enterprise is where basically our dashboards are housed, whether that's an individual user's dashboard or a team's dashboard, and it's full of rich dynamic visualizations, and we're going to be exploring these as we go along. So let's get stuck into this. So what I have here is a quote from Mr. Stephen Few about what on earth data visualization actually is. And the things that I want to really show on here are nice and orange. So we're looking at the sense making, or as is nicely put in brackets here, data analysis. That's what we're going to be using dashboards for. But what we're also always using your dashboard environment for is to communicate. It's all about communication. So that's what we're going to be exploring. Those are the themes for today in terms of the dashboards. Always keep those in mind, no matter which point I'm going through, looking about data analysis and the communication aspect. So let's start off with the data analysis side, just by way of introduction. Why on earth do we need it? So what do we have here? Lots of numbers. What sense can you make from it? To be honest, very little. Why? Because there's no order to it, there's nothing. If I was to ask you how many 9s are there, as it stands, you're going to take a while to really figure out where we are. But what we can see is we can start to emphasize and highlight where these pieces of data are to make it really easy and obvious about which piece of data we care about. And the next small example we've got is a table view of our data. We're all familiar with this, and yes, it's got value in its own right in this traditional sense, but it's quite difficult to answer any real questions, such as what service is costing us the most. We'll probably be able to figure it out, but we want to add value and save ourselves time. So this is where data visualizations come in to use here. This form, we're looking at it in a diagrammatic format. I can see straight away that service number 2 is showing consistently as the most expensive year on year, except for if I move on to the next image, which is showing its most expensive year on year, except what we can see here in year 5. And what these enable us to do is just make sense of that data. That's what we were talking about before, making sense. Great. But then let's just think about how this communicates. We've got a bit of an understanding of what this might be, mainly because I'm talking about it, speaking over these slides to you. Now, what do we do when we use any dashboard environment, such as ABACUS Enterprise? I'm not going to be sat next to each and every one of you. You're not going to be sat next to your team explaining everything that is there, because it's an art of silent communication. But what on earth are we meaning by silent communication in context of dashboards? So rather than me explaining, let me show you. And just like that, I can start showing you bits of information, start to tell you a narrative without saying a word. And that's what we're wanting to do with our dashboards. So what we need to start to think about is the information that we're showing our audience. What messages are we trying to get across to them? And that point is something I really want to just hammer home here, is because it's very easy to set up a dashboard, and we've set them up with best intentions about what we're trying to get across to our audience, but it doesn't always mean that's what they're going to take on board. So I'm always going to encourage you, every time you create any form of dashboard, think about how that audience is going to receive it. What message will they see as that user? And we can start to explore how you can pinpoint that message as we go through our session today. The first point that I want to look at is around the navigation side of things, because we can use the links within ABACUS here to navigate through your dashboards and link out to external resources. So let's just have a look at this video clip, because this is one thing that we're going to look at in more detail in today's session. But we've got a landing page. We can control and click to navigate to secondary landing pages, which in turn leads us to navigate to our dashboards that you've spent time making up. But what we can see here, we can return back and forth to these landing pages, navigate to other dashboards, and ultimately we can link out to various sources, such as what we'll see here is we're linking out to either ABACUS community or our support portal. But we're able to do much more with this. This is looking at it from an Avolution perspective, but what you are able to do is link out to the likes of your SharePoint sites and anywhere you keep some documentation. That we're not trying to bring in and wipe out all of the tools from existence. We want you to be able to use ABACUS in conjunction with your existing tools, so you can generate more value and more efficiency in the way that you work. And then we start looking at, as I was saying before, how do we draw people's attention to particular parts of the dashboard? Color and size. What are we seeing here? Like, I've not even pointed anything out, but I can guarantee the first things you've spotted are these, because they're big, bold, and bright. What we can see is my number 9 here is showing my outstanding reviews, and no, that's not my TripAdvisor for any Airbnb that I run. That's showing me the work that I've got left. It's showing me work that is out of date or something that I need to complete. I can then see in this section here the work that still needs to be done on a line-by-line level. So we're using color and size as an eye-catching mechanism. And we've got to think about what kind of visualizations are going to be the best at portraying our data. Some work better than others. Fortunately, we have scientific studies that give us a bit more of an idea on what visual cues work and, of course, which ones don't. So this particular graph here is shown from William Cleveland and Robert McGill's paper on graphical perception. And it tells us that when we as designers visualize data, we've got to be aware of the shapes, the colors, and the positions of the content. And that's what we're going to be exploring a lot more today. And we've got a bit of an idea of the ordering of importance. Again, this is great at a certain level, and it's obviously got some solid validity. But what I'm also going to encourage you is, you know your teams, or most of the time you know who's going to be consuming a dashboard. Think about what engages them. Are they going to be interested in a diagram or a multitude of charts being displayed? Or are they, which this is something we come across quite a lot, they just care about seeing their data in a nice, neat, relevant format. Think about who you're presenting this data out to. And this is where we have a multitude of chart visualizations available within ABACUS Enterprise. Anyone who's sat in any training with me will hear that anything within ABACUS, it's not just not just an image, it's an actual view or a perspective of that data. And again, something I'm going to be banging on about today is having that view, having that perception. But before I take you through into ABACUS Enterprise to see this live in action, we're going to just summarize what these common problems really are. First of all, poor navigation. Any of you guys that have used ABACUS before, you'll have realized that you'll create a dashboard and we'll have a little celebration. Woohoo! We've done it. Fantastic. Often though, that is on a particular use case, which is great. But then what? If we want to say, let's say we've built an applications dashboard. We want to engage other areas of our organization. Me, as a business process manager, I would say, okay, I've heard about this tool that you're using. Let me have a look. I land on there and it's showing me application data. Do I care about that? Not in the slightest, not as a process manager. Instantly, I'm disengaged. So we can start using the landing pages and I'll teach you how you can do these yourselves and the thought process we go through. But that's one thing that we need to start considering. The second point, data overload. I'm as guilty for this as I know some of you guys on this call very much are when creating a dashboard. It's inherent to our work. We work with so much data on a day-to-day basis that sometimes I know we feel like, oh, I've got all this information, it's all valuable, so I'm going to throw it all there on a dashboard. Let's take stock. Let's not do that, because whilst all that information may well be valid, does it all need to be on one dashboard? Possibly not. Let's make it relevant for a specific purpose. A dashboard must have a purpose to tell a narrative to our audience. Let's not bombard them with lines and columns of data that's irrelevant to that specific case. And finally, let's bring some life into these dashboards. We've got the functionality, we know that, but what we also are able to do is make them a little bit easier on the eye. Let's start bringing some imagery into there. Let's start using our own company's colors, get our logo in there, have these landing pages that suit our organization rather than just having page after page after page of just tables of data. That's not what we want to see. So let's take a step into ABACUS Enterprise now, and let's see how you can do this. So let me just give my browser a quick refresh, and hoping everyone can still see my screen. Now I've moved across. And what we're seeing here is exactly what we saw on that little video clip before. This is just a landing page for my ABACUS Enterprise site. And what you'll see is every time I hover over these, we've got a control click to open. That's fine. We'll go through some of these shortly. We've got different buttons. And just to kind of ruin the illusion, what we've got here, this isn't something that's taken hours to build. This is just a diagram, and we'll see how we can make this. It's built using just a couple of SVG images that we can import. Again, I'm going to teach you how you can do these. And then we've got links, again, added into our diagram that link out to our external sources. All of it is able to be done by yourselves. And I'm just going to hit Control and let's navigate through some of these dashboards. Initially, it takes me through to my secondary landing page. But let's start by going in from the top, from this application overview. And what we're seeing, the first thing that I want to point out is not the different portlets that we have on our screen. No. I want to point out this banner here because, again, remember the points I mentioned before. What if the audience was to land on here and go, I don't care about applications, where's the home page? You could, this is more showing the functionality, click on this drop-down menu and try and find it yourself, but let's make it easy. Let's save our team's time by just making it a one-click experience to take them around. But what we can start to see if I navigate back to this now, is we've got our tree maps, our portlet, chart portlets, catalogs, and a diagram. If I drill down into here, we can start seeing I get some filtering mechanism going on. That when we actually use these filters now, it filters out our diagrams with them. I can remove my filter. We're going to explore some of these as we go along. I'm just going to continue navigating through to some other data points. Because now what we're seeing is, again, something a bit different. It's not just a table of data. I know there's something that's drawn my eye here, and that's because I've brought in some imagery. I wouldn't encourage you to do lots of this, but the fact is you can do this. This is just taking a standard photo from Google or whatever search engine you're using and converting a PNG file to an SVG and then importing that. That's all I've done here, but it's given me a nice clear message. Complete my data. Make sure this data set is filled. Maybe give some clearer instruction about which data you want filled. But what we can see, I've just got a nice succinct data set here. That's all I really care about. Moving on, let's have a look at this application portfolio view. And now we're starting to see that next point, size and coloration. Now here, it's a little bit of a congested view. Some of you may have seen a dashboard similar to this in any demonstrations you may have had. But what we're starting to see is a rag status, basically showing red. Again, red always seems to catch my eye. And it's the same with a lot of people because it's quite a bold color. And what we're seeing here is the amount of high level criticality values. But what also will draw attention to is the fact that we've actually got 49 items that have got no value at all. So we can start utilizing these filters to drill down into our data. So now looking at 208 level 5s. Let's have a look at the ones that are due to be retired or eliminated. Now color is no longer useful because they're all red, but if we drill down to the ones that are end of life, what we can start to see from an application perspective here is the technical fit and business fit scores. We're going to be looking at the financial implications of these views in a little while, but what I can see is this top one, it's sized based on its value. If I look at one of these smaller dots, hopefully you can see that in the brackets, it's not got any financial value attributed to it. I can see application 582, imaginative name for an application, is worth 650K. Good technical fit, good business fit. We've got lots of details here about what on earth it might be, but what I'm wanting to see now is, well, that's great. I can see data, but now what? I want to be able to talk to who owns this application. Why can't I see this data? So something new for ABACUS 8 that when the release comes, you'll have this functionality. We can now add in properties. We can create new properties or add in existing properties to our catalog. So let's add in the stakeholder, the application manager onto here. Click OK. Just quickly remove and reapply my filters. Just to make sure we've got the right one showing. There we go, we can see nice and quickly how they get applied. And there we go, application manager. I can see that there's an email address in this property. And what does that enable me to do? Well, quite simply, I can click to chat with my colleague in Microsoft Teams. And it opens that up straight away. I can start chatting away here. So that's great in terms of engaging through a dashboard and getting in contact with anyone in your team just to get that bit of information, say, oh, hi, what are we replacing with this application with? But what if this is a senior stakeholder? What you might want to do is provide them with something a bit easier. So rather than say where you want to go, we can go to our team in here. And what we can do is see that we can actually, I can log in as someone else and log into this dashboard. And I'm logged in as someone else. And that's what we can see here. What I want to do though is if I go back onto here, I just want to see this pre-filtered dashboard. I can say to whoever, well, actually, this particular one, clicking this button at the top and saving it to the URL. Let me just copy that as well, because what I can do is use that URL, what we've got here, that's pre-filtered. What does that mean? So I can add this on here, add a new tab, and say, this could be Natasha, and I just have to paste this link into here, and I click on save. What it enables us to do is go straight in from that point of view. So you've generated that viewpoint, it's streamlined straight to the point. You're saving yourself and you're saving your colleagues time and effort by pointing them to where they need to be, rather than go, oh, navigate to this website link, click here, then here. Point them directly to it. It's going to save you an awful lot of time. But moving on from this view, I'm just going to remove some of these links, and we're just going to have a look at a couple more application perspectives. So we're going to start off with this view here. And now we're looking at a different form of data. So we can start to see the different kind of visualizations that we're using, because what do we care about now? We're looking at timeline perspectives. So we're looking at the number of applications retiring by date. And that's what we can see from February 2017 all the way to July 2030. Well, let's say, well, what's going to retire? And this is where I can apply a filter in here before November 2020. So before the end of this month. I've got all of these that are filtered down, but I can see I've got all of these items that are in production that are due to be the end of life before the end of this month. I don't know about you, but I've got some alarm bells ringing here if I've got all of these applications due to expire. So this would be something where instantly I've got that message, there's something that I need. What I'd probably do here is not make them green, let's make them red. What we can do is do that and change the color settings within our chart. So what we might want to do here, got color by range, but what you'll see is the date settings, it's actually the 5-digit code. So I've got today's date on here is, let's put the future date actually, as in, I think that's the same one that I had in mind, and then 4415 is today's date. Helps if I put the numbers in. And what I want to do is create that rag status. So this is all possible for you to do. I want that as a red, anything there is a green. If I've done that right, that's showing anything before today's date as red. If I remove this now, we can see that color scheme has been applied. So I can see from here, it starts showing as red. Moving on to the last slide, last dashboard from the application perspective now. Again, sticking on the timeline perspective, but what we're looking at now is not just applications, because applications don't just interact with themselves in their own little corner of the enterprise architecture sphere and that's it. They're connected further wide. And that's what we're looking at here in terms of the capability perspective. So I could come in here as that capability manager. But this is something to bear in mind when you're drilling through these dashboards. Because what you'll see, and this has probably happened to some of you who use ABACUS already, you'll drill down into your capabilities and go, oh dear Lord, where's my data gone? And panic sets in. But what I want you to understand here is nothing's disappeared at all. It's applying the filter based on your visualization. So just a little bit of reassurance and more something to keep in mind. These portlets are pointing towards the application data and only the application data. These are capabilities that are showing the aggregated timelines of whatever sits underneath it. In this case, the processes. Then these processes we'll see are connected through to applications, and there we go. We start to see the applications reappear because that's what we care about in this instance. This is from an application perspective. We're looking at all of these that are due to retire. Again, same color scheme. Any that are red, out of date. So we've got multiple applications here that are before today's date, that if they're providing support to a process, this is, again, I'd be reaching out to whoever by the means that I went through before, saying, are these still in practice, are being used? If so, what's the risk of these going out of action? And if not, can we mark them out as being obsolete completely and not being used anymore? Again, I'll just remove my filter. I'm going to carry on using my banner here, and I'm going to now, let's have a look at some of our business dashboards. Start off with the strategic style view. We'll not spend too long on these because I want to make sure I spend enough time teaching you how to construct these views. But what we can start to see now is more from a financial perspective. We're seeing our strategic, our strategies rather, in this catalog. But again, I don't know about you, but I know for me, I open this dashboard and I'm drawn to this one because it's bold, it's bright, it's showing me these that are red, that are linked to my recommendation. And how do I know that? I can click on my cog and I can see that they're colored based on the recommendation, again in that RAG status. So we have the poor in red, good in green, and fair in yellow. And what I, again, wanting to point out some of these new features, I want to look at this business innovation strategy. I click on that, and what we'll see, if I open out this diagram a bit bigger, zoom in, we'll see it zooms in much easier than previously. I can start to see how this particular strategy links to our objectives and goals in what a business growth area and the IT alignment area. We can start to see where they are connected. The other ones there, we're just not focused on them for now. Again, what we're doing, we're using diagrams as data visualizations here, not just the charts, catalogs, and the dynamic visualizations, but we're also using diagrams now. What we can see though is, from a financial point of view, is the amount of cost, the total cost of ownership that's gone into these strategies. And whilst it might seem, if I just scroll across onto here, that we've got the TCO, total cost of ownership, that is just a figure that's plugged in, this can be automated. This figure can be driven based on your connected components. So if we've got departments that are connected through to this strategy, we might be taking a portion of their budget that could be a property set elsewhere and putting it onto that total cost of ownership. So that's a method of automation. Not something we're going to be going through today. That's definitely a lesson for another webinar. But what we're seeing across the x-axis, let's see how this is set up again. The x-axis is a financial TCO, the y, return on investment. So we can start to see the amount of investment that we're putting in against what our return is. The value of recommendation, good, poor, fair, again, that can be done based on a calculation that's done from this. So we can look at it based on a percentage or a margin, again, automated. So it takes that subjectivity away from your calculations, rather than thinking, well, we think this is good, so we'll mark it as good, even if the numbers don't back it up. Let the numbers, let the data do the talking and the calculations for you. Moving on to a project view now. So something that I know quite a few of you are interested in as well. Very similar perspective. Details of our projects, what timelines we've got on there. So we've got details associated with them, but this is more of an overview, high level view of it. We're looking at how much our projects are costing year on year. And again, TCO and return on investment over the next 5 years. Same principle as before. We've got our views of a diagrammatic purpose, but let's select one. And again, what we can see, if I actually click on the right bit, is it filters down the diagram. So rather than seeing all the lines crisscrossing over each other, we're being nice and selective around what we can see. Obviously, we can zoom around these. It's worth pointing out that these are editable now. I can actually go across and revamp some of these. We'll not do too much of that today, not in this particular example anyway. But we'll see how this can be done a bit more on the final business one in terms of the capabilities view. Now, first thing that we're seeing here is all of our capabilities on this diagram as a traditional capability map. Great. We've all seen these. Absolutely fantastic. We all have them. We all need them. We've got graph view. Some of you will become familiar with this in terms of seeing that initial impact analysis, but I know what you're thinking here. Great, Nick, you're showing everything that's connected, but I can't read it. I don't know where to look. Again, there's no focus. So what do we do? I'm repeating myself a lot, but this is what we're doing here. We can use these portlets to filter down and hone in on what we want to see. So I only care about my management support processes. And look, it filters down my diagram again. I just care about my manage information technology, again, sized based on financial value. And look, we've got some coloration in there. And now we're just seeing what we actually care about. We're just seeing the one capability and its processes, and then we can follow that path out from there, should we wish. What you're also able to do, if I just maximize this diagram now, is you can start adding into these diagrams. So I can add a new capability. Should I wish, I can add a new grouping. So I can literally just click on here, add the capability, and I can add that into the repository. I'm not going to do that just yet, because what I do want to do is bring all my data back, because not only is it a matter of adding data in, I can zoom in. I want to say, well, actually, this one is green. It's marked as to be retained or refreshed, but let's click on this. I can start to edit the key data. Let's say, well, actually, this is going to be redesigned, not retained at all. The color changes with that. So the same method of heat mapping and colorations that you'll have seen previously in ABACUS Studio, editing diagrams, all that is now available within ABACUS. Well, I say now, will be available within ABACUS 8. But sticking on this particular view, what I want to show you here is, great, we've got this particular view of capabilities in terms of how they are colored, but that's just one lens of it. It's one perspective. Reuse some of your diagrams to basically add more value in a different capacity. So what I'm seeing here is the colors based on the processor's recommendation. Why don't we have a look at it from a financial perspective? It's the exact same diagram, but this time we're using a rag status to show, well, which one's my most expensive items. The redder the color, the more expensive it is. We can't see the data on or how much it costs on here, but I can see just from this, if I'd advise to build a legend with this to indicate on that. But I've not got that financial data available on this one view. But moving on to the next view, what we can start to see is I've used a different format of coloration here. So I'm using the gradient approach. And in this case, we're looking at the deeper shade of blue it is, the more applications are connected to it. So that's what I'm now showing, this little number in the bottom corner. Again, still would use the likes of a legend just to make it nice and clear for your audience. Again, all about the communication aspect. In this instance, though, what I'm seeing is this particular one is using or has 34 applications that are connected to it. So 34 applications to run this. Now, let me just coin this slightly differently. Imagine that these are capabilities or processes, and the number is looking at projects that are working on this. What value can we see here? It's actually 34 projects could be working and improving this particular process, and none on these. So what we can start to do then is question, well, why is that the case? Why is all of our effort focused on one? Let's see where the disparity is in terms of the focus of our effort. Just going to go through some of these senior management dashboards now before we move on to the last bit in terms of how you can actually make these yourself. So looking at the senior management dashboards, we can see it's done based on role. So we can look at it from a service management level, different layouts in terms of more pie charts set up based on similar color schemes. The default ones that we have is a bit more softer on the eye with the green through to a blue. But all we're seeing here is, again, maximize this, the availability of servers, which in turn impacts the reliability of our applications. Again, all of these figures can be automated through ABACUS using algorithms and some of the other simulators that are available. Whizzing by some of these final ones. Risk management, similar perspective to what we saw before. This time we're using a bubble chart to look at the impact, severity, and the probability. Again, the color is popping out to me. I need to pay attention to this one. So I can do. And I can start seeing the details that are associated to it. Again, it's that narrative. We're trying to save time by taking whoever the user is, so a risk manager, to their dashboard and let them see the data that is most pertinent to them, rather than having to trial and error click their way through. And finally, let's have a quick look at the dashboard. Finance management, something really here quite simplistic. Probably want to make this a bit more robust, but what we can see here is we're just looking at the costs of items in our repository. The yearly cost for applications, see it declining. The same for cost of our capabilities, getting an overall cost by region. So this could be to do with our servers. We can start showing the relevant information based on the user's role. Lots of different items that we can start to see here. But that then leads to the question, how on earth can you do this? So let's explore that. I am going to bring up ABACUS Studio now. If I just bring that up onto the screen, there we go. And what we can see is I'm revealing the magic behind the curtain, as I was saying before, even more so now. This, what is it? It's an image. It's an SVG that I have imported. Yes, don't worry, I'm going to show you how to bring these in. But all I've done is bring in shapes from our stencil, such as these, and applied some text to them. In this case, if we look at this, right click, open links, I've got a link to our external source. So that linking out to our community site, this one linking to a particular dashboard. So if I just hop back onto ABACUS Enterprise, we'll see that each dashboard has its own unique URL, which helps you navigate to that. And it's the same for these in terms of open the link again, can add that, and it's just gone to a diagram that is already within ABACUS. So nice and simple when you start to think about what this actually is. It's nothing overly complex at all. But I know what you're probably thinking. It's like, Nick, great, fine, you've made this before the session. I've tried to do this before and have been unsuccessful. Show me a better way to do it. So let's do that then. So what I've said already is, if I go to my Visio file, there we go. I've actually brought in some logos already. These are just some bog standard SVG images from Google, nothing over the top. But you can see the range of shapes, range of colors, and I'm just going to bring these in. word to the wise, you do need a Visio license to be importing these into ABACUS. And what I will always encourage anyone to do is actually save these as a .vsd file rather than .vsdx. It just helps with the streamlining in terms of importing this data in. So I've saved this file, but how do we actually import these? Quite simply, right click on your architectures, and we have the option, if you're a configurer that is, to import from Visio. Got this ready here. When it imports, hopefully this time, rather than bringing in one a few times over, that's because it's trying to map it to an existing component. As a configurer, what you'll see is now asking me to bring them in as new components. I'm just going to say next on that, and this is where it's important for you guys to remember this, because as you can see, we all can make mistakes as we go along. There we go, they've all imported as a separate architecture. First thing to bear in mind is these have been imported as components. Just going to highlight them all, right click, go to my annotations, and just remove the name from them. So there we go. So there. I don't want these as actual components. So I'm going to right click and convert them to freeform shapes. No longer text anymore. But what we can do is, let's say with this one, right click, add to shapes library. Give it a name and you click on OK. That is there as a logo now for you to use. This one, let's use this one. We've got these here now. That's in a separate architecture. But what I'm going to do in my landing page architecture, it's just a separate workspace, nothing more. Conscious of time, I want to make sure I can show you this quite cleanly. But I'm going to make that form of landing page that we saw before. So something similar to this. Open the right one for you guys to use. So what we do is just right click. I'm going to create a diagram. In this instance, I don't want to use a viewpoint. But what I'm going to do, let's just call this new, what was it called? Logo Ipsum landing. That's what I'm going to do. Quite simply, right click on, if I go to my home screen first of all, because I want to bring certain parts of this across. I want to bring these bits, apart from my ABACUS logo and this background. Right click, copy, just because these are sized based on what I know works. Control V, you can see it's zoomed in slightly. So let's just zoom out and we can see that all that is there. So it's in a similar format. Let's bring that logo across now. Right click, copy, and paste. There we go. That can sit there. Great, we've started. Now let's make, what can we do to make this look a bit more like a landing page? Quite simply, we use our stencil and the shapes that we have available. So I'm just going to add in this here, hit space because I don't want my shape to have any name at all. Just going to resize that and center back. Now we've got a bit of a background for my logo, because what I'm looking at here is the color scheme. We've got quite a deep navy blue. So let's have a deep navy blue background. Who thought you'd be having an art lesson today? So again, let me just do that. Trying to find my mouse. Let's maximize this. Center back with this button at the top. And let's right click, change color to a shade of nice dark blue. Great. Now what? Let's continue with these links. So I'm going to change all of these now. So we've got some text that suits our background. So annotation, change font color. What we need to make sure we do here is not just change the font color, because we've also got links out to our other resources. So let's just change these as we go and click on OK. Yep, getting there. I am going to change that color again because this is where I get nice and picky. I want it a bit darker. That's better. But what I want to do now is I'm going to highlight all of these. What you'll see is it's highlighted the shape as well. I'm just going to control and click it and control and click this. Let's change the color of these. Change color. Let's do some form of nice hot pink. Accept that one. Just increase transparency here, and shouldn't be able to see that. Effectively, I've created myself a landing page here. So I might want to just space these out a little bit for any formatting. I say I'd spend a bit of time formatting these, and you can basically, you've got yourself some form of landing page here. All I need to do, file, save, recommit that to my repository. Might need to update, because one thing to bear in mind is when you're creating these is, there you go, it's out of date because I've been working in the file on ABACUS Enterprise, which should be here. So every 5 minutes it's periodically updating. So it will have found some more updates. And what I should be able to do now is, let me just make sure that has committed. I can update that from here, file on my username, update from the repository. And what we should see is once my commit has taken hold, there we go, I've just got the message from my screen. That's why it's hopping back across. For some reason, my multi-screen setup, it likes to move them around as we go, but now I can update this from here. What we're doing here is updating manually. This does update automatically every 5 minutes, so don't feel like it's something that you really need to do, but I can force this with my license privileges. But I'm just going to go File, Configure, New, and New Landing Page. And now let's add that diagram portlet. And what we should be able to see, there it is, the one that I've just added in. You've got yourself a landing page based on the colors of your logo, colors of your organization, to make it more personal. That looks a bit different to what we saw before. Let me just configure and save that here. A bit different to this view here. It feels more like your company or another company other than what's bog standard out of the box. Looking at time, that pretty much brings me to a close for today's session. I think we've got quite a few questions that have come in, so I don't know, Amy, are you wanting to read any of these out, or I can hopefully access them myself?
Sorry, Nick. Yep, no, I'm more than happy to read them out. Thank you for a fantastic presentation. You're right, we've had quite a few questions come in. So we'll start at the beginning. When you add a property to a catalogue in Enterprise, does it persist or is it reset after you navigate away?
Good question. So what will happen is if you add, let's go back to my catalogue. Where do I want to go? I'll just remember where. Let's go to this data entry one. If you were to add a new property, an existing property in, it would add it in for whilst you're working on there. It would actually format that catalog. So once that saves in, it would save that view in your repository as well. So it's worth bearing in mind, if you edit a view here, it's going to be edited for anyone else that's using that catalog. It's worth pointing out that it's a separate license, and I don't know if I've got the full commercial details of what licenses are able to model on Enterprise, but yeah, if you add a new property into this catalog, it will save on that. Hope that answers that.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question is, what's the difference between save to URL and copy URL?
Again, very good question. So save to URL basically means if I was to, let's try and show this in action. So if let's bring out Natasha again. What you'll see at the moment, if I copy the URL, first of all, don't know if it's going to let me, I'll copy the URL and then paste that. It's not done the right one. Essentially, it's not letting me show that, but what it means is when you save that, it allows you to just see the URL on that screen. I think you need to save the URL first. So it saves that setting, save that filter, and then once you've saved the URL, you can then copy that out. So that filtering mechanism is essentially saved for that next user to navigate to. Hope that made sense.
That's brilliant, thank you. Next question, the capability map drill down, is that a diagram based or hierarchy of capabilities?
Good question again. And again, let's show you more behind the curtain on this, because essentially all it is, as you rightly say, it is very much a diagram view. So it's diagrams linking out to other diagrams. So we started off with our business capability view, and all I've essentially done is taken a copy of this diagram and changed the settings behind that. I've applied a link into here that navigates through those three, but essentially it's the same data, it's just applying a different lens on each view.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question, sorry Nick, there's quite a few questions, which is brilliant. I see there's an option for meta model change requests. How does that feature work, and is it out of the box functionality?
Yeah, so it's something that I've not really covered too much today, but it's something that I see a need for in a lot of our clients. So it's not necessarily out of the box per se, but all this essentially is, we've got an article on our community site that shows you how to build this into your meta model. So what we can see is this is incorporated into your ABACUS project. So we have what we just see as a change request here. And essentially what you're able to do is build this into any ABACUS project, whether it's the Avolution standard out of the box or any architecture framework that you've built out yourselves. And this dashboard, all it enables me to do, let's say I'm a user coming in here. So again, we're looking at that engagement perspective. So what we can do is, well, I want to use ABACUS, but for your projects, you're not showing my, I don't know, setup time. So I'd say, well, I need a property on projects for setup time. Don't know if that's even valid, but all I need to do is put it in the change request folder and assign the element that it's selected to. All of this can be automated based on that article that I mentioned before, so you don't have to worry about building this out manually. But what you'll see, I can put that in there, put a topic of property, click on OK, and that's added that into here as well. Now you can see that I've added it in. And what we'll see, there's some algorithms behind the scenes, again, incorporated with that article that show you how that works. So we'll provide a link on any collateral we send out with that article, so you are able to build this out.
Brilliant, thank you. You've still got a couple more questions. Would you like me to carry on? Or...
Yeah, let's carry on.
Okay, cool. So the next one is, that appears to be an architecture evolution. I'd love to hear people processes for using that to propose meta model changes.
Can you repeat that one for me, please? Sorry,
yeah,
Amy.
I think rereading it, it was probably asked at a particular area of time. Okay, it was connected to Scott's question. in regards to what you just explained.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear with regards to people processes for using that to propose meta model changes.
People process for using that to propose meta. So yeah, essentially, if I've understood this right, apologies if I've not, is what you're essentially doing for this change request is that you can give a specific editor access to your users. So you need to be an editor to use this functionality, but they can log in and essentially just say, well, actually, from this perspective, I want to see X, Y, or Z changed from here. So it doesn't have, this is more at a meta model level. If you're looking at it from a process perspective, you can actually build out something very similar to call out individual components to say, well, actually, can we put this? So I guess let's think on the spot here. But if I go into this particular one here, so we've got our capabilities. This is where you could add a new property. So type, notes, comments, and you could basically allow your users to then put their own comments on here, just detailing what you might want to add on to that. Not sure if that fully covers the question. If it does, great. If not, obviously do follow up.
Yeah, no, I think that covered it perfectly. In fact, I was just rereading, and apparently you explained it before already. So thank you for going into it in more detail for us. That's great. Thank you. So if we call this the last question, we have, so can you auto scale the size of landing pages to account for users, different size screens? E.g. to filter screens. So can you auto scale the size of landing pages to account for the user's different screen sizes? Very
good question. The short answer for that, unfortunately, is no. It's very much a matter of, for example, just sizing it based on the monitor that you're using. What I do find useful is obviously if you've got multiple users log in, same landing page from different resolution screens, what you're best doing is using the actual browser function. Let's say if I had mine at 100%, obviously this is illegible to me now. So I have mine preset at what I know will come out at the right sizing. So that, unfortunately, is the only way I can really think that you can auto scale it to the best, to this level.
Brilliant, thank you. I believe that is actually a development ticket that we have, and hopefully we'll be working on this in 2021. So watch this space.
Oh, that's great.
Excellent, cool. Okay, well, thank you very much, Nick. That's been a fantastic presentation. Just to let everybody know, it has been recorded and we will be sharing it around within the next day or so. But thank you again, Nick. It's been brilliant.
That's great. Thank you all for joining, and yeah, any other questions after this call's ended, do feel free to get in touch with us.